DJI controls between 70 and 80% of the entire global drone market from a single company in Shenzhen. You heard that right. That is a bigger stranglehold on a global industry than Microsoft ever had on personal computer operating systems at the peak of its monopoly. And that is just the beginning. Because by the time America declared DJI a national security threat and moved to ban it, the dependency was already complete. The police, the film sets, the farms, the battlefields, all already running on DJI. This is the story of how one engineer with $2,000 quietly took ownership of the sky before the most powerful government on Earth even looked up. Hit a quick like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how that happened and why the ban that was supposed to fix it may have arrived too late to change anything. It starts in 2006, in a dormitory, with a helicopter that would not stop crashing. The dormitory. Picture a shoebox-sized room in a university dormitory in Shenzhen. The year is 2006. A 26-year-old engineering student named Frank Wang has just spent most of his savings, $2,000, on components for a remote-controlled helicopter flight stabilization system. Not a drone, not a product, a controller. A single piece of technology designed to stop a helicopter from doing what helicopters, at that scale, almost always do: crash. Wang had been obsessed with remote-controlled helicopters since he was a child. But every time he flew one, the same problem appeared. The moment conditions changed, a gust of wind, a slight miscalculation, a fraction of a second of inattention, the machine fell out of the sky. He was not interested in the helicopter. He was interested in the problem. And the problem, as he saw it, was not the pilot. It was the absence of intelligent stabilization. Nobody had solved it properly, so he decided to solve it himself. Here is what most people never think about: the thing Wang built in that dormitory was not a drone company. It was a solution looking for an industry that did not yet exist. He was not founding DJI. He was fixing a helicopter. The company came later, almost by accident, because the fix turned out to be that good. He called the company DJI Dajiang Innovations. Great Frontier Innovations. In English. He started selling his flight stabilization controllers to hobbyists. And for 3 years, almost nobody bought them. Investors passed. The market was too small. The technology was too niche. The vision was too early. Wang kept building anyway. He hired a handful of engineers. He ran the company out of that same dormitory energy lean, obsessive, focused entirely on making the hardware better rather than making the pitch deck prettier. But the market was not his only problem. In 2010, one of his earliest engineers, a man Wang had trusted, trained, and considered a core part of the team, left and took a significant portion of DJI's early technology with him to start a competing firm. For a company with no outside funding, no safety net, and a product the market had not yet decided it wanted that was close to a fatal blow, most founders would have folded. Wang responded by rebuilding, tightening, and accelerating. He did not slow down. He got angry. In the most productive way a founder can get angry. He built faster. Here is the detail that puts everything into perspective. By 2012, DJI had fewer than 50 employees and was operating out of a modest office in Shenzhen. The American drone industry, such as it was, consisted mostly of military contractors and hobbyist communities that had no idea a Chinese hardware company was about to make everything they were doing look primitive. The gap between where DJI was and where it was about to go is one of the most dramatic single-company accelerations in the history of consumer technology. But the dormitory phase, the rejections, the theft, the obsessive iteration, that was not just backstory. That was the engine. Everything DJI became was built on the discipline Wang developed in those years when nobody was watching and nobody was buying. The company that would one day power Hollywood blockbusters and American police departments started as one man, refusing to accept that a helicopter had to fall out of the sky. And as extraordinary as that foundation was, it is still not the main event. Because in 2013, Frank Wang did something that did not just change DJI, it changed what the entire world thought a drone could be. The phantom moment. Imagine you are holding a television remote control that is roughly the size and weight of what serious drone hobbyists were working with in 2012. Flying a drone back then was like building your own computer in 1979. Possible, but only for a specific kind of person. Frank Wang looked at that barrier and decided to demolish it. In January 2013, DJI launched the Phantom 1. Not the most powerful drone ever built, not the most technically sophisticated. What it was, and this is the detail competing engineers still do not like to admit, was the first drone a normal person could take out of a box and fly within minutes. No assembly, no calibration ritual, no engineering degree. One box, one drone, ready to go. The price was $479. You heard that right. When comparable aerial photography setups cost thousands of dollars and days of preparation, DJI put a camera-ready drone in a box for less than a weekend trip. The consumer drone market did not grow after the Phantom 1 launched. It was created by it. Here is what makes this incredibly exciting. Before the Phantom 1, drones were either military hardware or hobbyist projects. After it, drones were something anyone could own and build a business around. Within 18 months, entire industries of drone photographers, agricultural operators, and inspection professionals had emerged around a platform that simply did not exist before. Competitors responded. American companies, European companies, Chinese startups all accelerated. Some matched DJI on specs, a few briefly matched on price, but DJI was not standing still. The Phantom 2 arrived, then 3, then the Inspire 1, the tool of choice for professional cinematographers, then the Mavic, a professional-grade drone that fit in a jacket pocket. Every time a competitor reached where DJI had been 18 months earlier, DJI had already moved on. The gap never closed because DJI never stopped running. By 2015, DJI won an Emmy Award. Not a technology prize, an Emmy for contributions to cinematography in Game of Thrones and NFL broadcasts. A dormitory hardware company had become so embedded in the world's largest entertainment pipelines that the people who judge television excellence felt compelled to acknowledge it. That is not market share. That is cultural infrastructure. But a dominant product and a Hollywood award is still only half the equation. Because what DJI built underneath the hardware, invisible to most users, irreplaceable to every professional, is the real reason the band that came a decade later changed almost nothing. The ecosystem trap. Think about a power outlet in your house. You do not think about it. You do not evaluate it. You plug things in and they work. Now imagine that every appliance you own, every device you depend on, every workflow in your home was built around one specific outlet, made by one specific company. And then imagine that company is suddenly declared a national security risk. You cannot just swap the outlet, you have to rebuild the house. That is what DJI built. Not a drone, a power outlet that an entire industry plugged into without realizing it was the only outlet in the room. Here is how it happened. When DJI launched the Phantom 1, it did something most hardware companies at that stage do not do. It opened its software. It built developer APIs, think of those as official instruction manuals that allow outside companies to build their own tools directly on top of DJI's platform. A mapping software company could integrate directly with DJI's flight systems. An agricultural analytics firm could plug its crop monitoring tools straight into DJI's data pipeline. A Hollywood production house could build its entire camera operation workflow around DJI's gimbal and imaging software. And they did. Thousands of them did. Because DJI invited them in, gave them the tools to build, and then made sure those tools only worked cleanly on DJI hardware. Here is where people consistently underestimate this story. They think DJI's dominance is about the drone. It is not about the drone. The drone is the handle on a door that opens into an ecosystem so deep and so interconnected that walking away from it means abandoning not just the hardware, but the software subscriptions, the workflow integrations, the trained personnel, the institutional memory, and the thousands of third-party tools that were built specifically for DJI's platform and do not exist for any other. A police department switching away from DJI does not buy new drones. It rebuilds its entire aerial operations program from scratch. A film production company switching away from DJI does not swap cameras. It retires workflows that took years to develop and retrains crews that spent careers mastering a specific system. The numbers make this concrete. By 2024, DJI's software development kit had been downloaded by more than 200,000 developers worldwide. 200,000, that is roughly the population of a mid-sized American city like Spokane, Washington. Every single one of them building something that runs on DJI. The accessory ecosystem around DJI hardware had grown to thousands of compatible products across dozens of categories. Carrying cases, charging systems, specialized lenses, thermal imaging attachments, agricultural spray systems, an entire secondary market that only exists because DJI exists, and that would become worthless the moment DJI disappeared. Now here is the part that started making governments very uncomfortable. DJI's software does something no physical hardware can do after the sale. It updates, remotely, silently, to every drone in its ecosystem simultaneously. That means DJI can push performance improvements and safety features to millions of drones already in the field without the owner doing anything. But it also means DJI can push restrictions. The system is called geofencing. Through a software update, DJI can designate any geographic area on Earth as a no-fly zone and prevent any drone in its ecosystem from entering that space. Airports, government buildings, military installations. DJI has used this cooperatively with authorities around the world. But the capability itself, the ability to reach into a drone you purchased and tell it where it cannot go, sits entirely with a company headquartered in Shenzhen. Not in Washington, not in Brussels. In Shenzhen, here is the detail that engineers do not want to admit. The ecosystem trap was not a strategy born in a boardroom. It was the natural consequence of building the best product, opening it to developers, and iterating faster than anyone else. DJI did not lock industries in by force. It locked them in by being so useful, so early, so consistently, that by the time anyone thought to ask whether depending on a single Chinese company for critical infrastructure was wise, the dependency was already structural. Pull it out, and the ceiling comes down. But knowing how the trap was built is one thing. Understanding just how many industries walked into it and how completely is something else entirely. Because the 4 stories that come next are not just about market share. They are about the specific, operational, day-to-day reality of what it means to be inside the ecosystem with no exit that does not cost you everything. The 4 dependencies. Here is where the story stops being about market share and starts being about something that keeps policy analysts awake at night. Not one industry, not 2, 4. 4 separate, critical, irreplaceable American industries so deeply inside DJI's ecosystem that the ban Washington eventually delivered landed like a noise complaint at a party that had already been running for a decade. Start with Hollywood. DJI hardware and software is embedded in the production pipelines of the world's largest entertainment companies. Not preferred, embedded. The aerial sequences in the films you watched last weekend, the stadium shots and the sports broadcast you streamed last night shot on DJI. The Emmy was not a courtesy award. It was an acknowledgement that DJI had become as fundamental to modern cinematography as the camera itself. Then agriculture. 400,000 DJI agricultural drones are currently operating across American farmland. 400,000, that is more unmanned aircraft than the United States military operated globally at the peak of its drone program. That comparison is worth sitting with for a moment. The precision farming workflows built around DJI's platform, the spray patterns, the crop mapping systems. The yield analysis integrations cannot be migrated to another platform without rebuilding entire operational systems from the ground up. American farmers did not choose DJI over competitors. They chose the tool that worked, built their businesses around it, and now cannot leave without dismantling those businesses. Now here is the part that nobody talks about loudly enough: public safety. 90% of American police departments run their aerial operations on DJI hardware. Fire services, search and rescue teams, The drone hovering over a missing child's last known location. The aerial unit mapping a wildfire's spread. The eye above. A hostage situation giving commanders real-time intelligence 90% of the time. That is a DJI drone. A drone built by a company on the Pentagon's own national security blacklist. That contradiction is not a footnote. It is the entire argument. And then there is the battlefield. Here is the thing that makes every other dependency look manageable by comparison. Soldiers and military-adjacent operators in active conflict zones across Ukraine, the Middle East, and Asia are purchasing DJI drones off commercial platforms. Not because they have not read the security briefings, because regardless of the geopolitics, DJI remains the best available tool at the most accessible price. The same drone your neighbor flies over his backyard is being used to spot artillery positions in active war zones. The ecosystem does not check credentials, it just works. And in a conflict, something that just works is worth more than something theoretically more secure that does not. 4 industries, each one a dependency, each one a different flavor of the same problem. The best tool won, and the best tool is Chinese. If the scale of that dependency surprised you, the security chapter coming next is going to be even harder to sit with. Hit subscribe so you are there when we cover what comes after this. And yet the question of whether any of this is actually dangerous, genuinely, operationally dangerous, is more complicated than Washington's response suggests, because the security case against DJI is real. But so is the counterargument, and both deserve to be heard. The security question. Here is the part where honest analysis matters more than a clean narrative. Because this chapter does not have a villain. It has a dilemma. The United States government's case against DJI is not fabricated. It is not paranoia dressed up as policy. It is built on a set of capabilities that are genuinely worth taking seriously. Start with telemetry. Every DJI drone in operation is collecting data, flight paths, locations, timestamps, camera footage metadata. The allegation never fully proven in any publicly available evidence, but never fully dismissed either, is that this data is being routed through servers with ties to the Chinese government. Think of it like a postal service that delivers your letters, but keeps a copy of every address you have ever written to. You may never notice. The copies may never be used, but someone, somewhere, has them. Then there is the geofencing capability you already know about. The ability to remotely restrict where any drone in the ecosystem can fly is a dual-use tool in the most uncomfortable sense of that phrase. Today, it keeps drones away from airports. Tomorrow, in a scenario no government wants to model publicly, it could be used to ground an entire national drone fleet with a single software update. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a logical extension of a capability that already demonstrably exists. Here is the part that most analysts agree on. The threat does not require active espionage. It does not require a smoking gun. It requires only that the capability exists and that the company holding it is legally subject to the Chinese National Intelligence Law, a law that compels any Chinese company or citizen to cooperate with state intelligence. Operations. Upon request. DJI does not have to be spying for the risk to be real. It has to be spyable. And by that standard, the government's concern is legitimate. But now, here is the counterargument, and it deserves equal weight. No verified, publicly available evidence of active DJI espionage has ever been produced. Not one confirmed case of telemetry data being weaponized against American interests. Not one documented instance of geofencing being used as a hostile act. DJI has repeatedly offered to submit to independent security audits. It established a government edition drone specifically stripped of data transmission capabilities for use by American public agencies. It opened its source code for review. Every concrete olive branch has been met with the same response, from Washington suspicion maintained, blacklist preserved, no audit commissioned, no evidence produced. Here is the uncomfortable truth that sits at the center of this debate. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. A sophisticated intelligence operation does not announce itself. The data, if it is being collected, would be collected quietly, stored patiently, and used strategically at a moment of maximum value, not in a way that triggers a news cycle. That is precisely what makes the threat so difficult to evaluate honestly. You cannot prove a negative. You cannot demonstrate that a capability has never been used simply because you have not caught it being used. What you can say, and what the record supports, is this: America made a choice. For roughly a decade, the choice was to buy the best drone at the best price and ask questions later. The questions arrived in the form of a Pentagon blacklist and a congressional ban. But the infrastructure those questions were meant to address was already in place, already operational, and already irreplaceable. Whether DJI is a genuine threat or the world's most successful hardware company that happened to be born in the wrong country for Washington's comfort, the dependency exists either way. And a dependency you cannot remove is a vulnerability whether or not it has ever been exploited. The ban was supposed to be the answer, but the timing of the ban told a story all by itself. The ban that changed nothing. In December 2025, the FCC made it official. DJI was banned. The regulatory hammer that Washington had been building toward for years finally landed. And on the exact same day, in what may be the most perfectly timed institutional self-contradiction in American technology policy history, FAA research confirmed that DJI accounted for 96% of all detected drone platforms in United States airspace. 96%. That is not a market. That is a monopoly so complete that the remaining 4% is essentially rounding error. Here is what most people never think about. A ban is only as powerful as the alternatives it creates. You can ban a product, you cannot ban a dependency. The police department still needed drones the morning after the ban. The farmers still needed to spray their crops. The film crews still had productions to shoot. And the American drone industry that was supposed to fill the gap, the one Washington had been hoping would emerge for years, was still nowhere near ready to replace what DJI had spent 2 decades building. The proposed American alternatives at the time of the ban cost between 2 and 4 times as much as comparable DJI hardware. They carried smaller accessory ecosystems, thinner software integrations, and shorter track records in the field. For a cash-strapped police department or a family farm operating on thin margins, the math was not complicated. The ban said, "Do not buy DJI." The market said, "There is nothing else worth buying." Now, here is the part that reframes everything. The ban did not arrive too late because Washington was asleep. It arrived too late because the dependency it was trying to prevent had already been structural for years. The door was not left open. It was never closed to begin with. And that is what makes the final question so important. Because the real verdict on DJI is not about the ban. It is about what the ban reveals. Who already owns the sky. Here is the verdict. And it does not care which side of the argument you are on. Whether DJI is a deliberate instrument of Chinese state intelligence or simply the most dominant hardware company the world has ever produced, the outcome is identical. The sky above your city is already spoken for. The drone above your police department, your farm, your film set, your battlefield already running on software built in Shenzhen, already dependent on servers you do not control, already embedded in workflows you cannot migrate without dismantling the operations built around them. Here is what this really means. DJI is not the story. DJI is the template. It is the first fully realized example of what quiet, structural, hardware-level technological dominance looks like in the 21st century. Not a social media platform you can delete. Not an app you can uninstall. Infrastructure. The kind that gets built into the load-bearing walls before anyone thinks to read the blueprints. America has had this conversation before about Huawei and telecommunications, about TSMC and semiconductors, about TikTok and social media. Every time, the conversation arrives after the dependency is already complete. Every time, the ban lands on a foundation that was poured years earlier. And every time, the most powerful government on earth finds itself debating how to respond to a situation that quietly resolved itself while everyone was looking somewhere else. DJI did not sneak into the sky. It was invited in, product by product, workflow by workflow, Emmy Award by Emmy Award. And by the time Washington looked up, the sky was already full. If this changed how you think about the technology you depend on every day, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think DJI is a genuine national security threat that deserves to be banned? Or did America simply build a dependency it was too distracted to notice until it was too late to undo?